I am Jill Broussard, a commercial photographer based in Dallas, Texas. This episode of Scope is brought to you by American Photographic Artists. APA is a not-for-profit organization for photographers who are primarily in the advertising, editorial, and commercial sectors. APA's mission is to help photographers succeed through the establishment of community, education, and advocacy. So I have the pleasure of being part of the Diversity Committee, a small and mighty group within APA dedicated to uplifting underserved photographic communities. This series on safe productions is designed to help us understand and consider the challenges that our peers and colleagues have on set and in pre-production and post-production, and find solutions for a more inclusive and holistic working environment. Thanks for joining us. So with that being said, I'm going to let one of our hosts, Jyotsna, introduce herself and tell you a little bit about herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Jyotsna Bhamidipati, and I'm a commercial and editorial photographer located physically in Sacramento, California. And I am super excited to talk to Karen today and be a part of the APA diversity team.
And we've got our diversity chair, Martine, and I'll let her tell a little bit about herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Martine Séverin. I am the chair of the APA Diversity Committee, and I'm a commercial lifestyle photographer based in Chicago. I'm so pleased to be here and to have Karen in the guest chair because I know it's going to be just amazing. So good to see you again, Karen.
Hi, thank you all so much for having me. I'm Karen Williams, the Black Visual Queen. I am a visual creative director, consultant, coach, mentor. Been in kind of the editorial brand space for 10 plus years. And my passion is just spewing my knowledge to demystify, the inner workings of the photo industry and hopefully make, one more person of color an opportunity in this space.
Nope. See, now I'm muted. Well, we are really, really excited to have you on. And if you don't follow Karen, you definitely need to follow her on Instagram, and we'll make sure to post all of that stuff. She is always putting out tons of great information, and LinkedIn. I'm sorry, I actually meant to say both of those. And she's wonderful. So today this is the first of a 3-part series about safe sets and how to build a more holistic environment, things to think about before, during, and after your production, and how to have the tools. What kind of tools do you need to be thinking about bringing along with you? So we brought in our expert, and we thought we could all roundtable a little bit on the ways that we've problem solved through our careers. So the first thing we want to do is talk about what is a safe set. And in the diversity committee, we talk a lot about it and like how to make safe places, but we thought we'd define it and talk about why it's important. So Karen, do you want to take the first crack?
I would say a safe set is always a place where everyone is being seen and heard, and that everyone feels, safe psychologically, physically, and emotionally. So a place where no one is afraid to speak up if something's going wrong, but at the same time not afraid to speak up if they've seen someone being yelled at or feel like they're about to be in some type of physical danger. So that's how I kind of define what a safe set is.
Yeah, we end up talking a lot about like who's in charge of, who's in charge of setting that tone, because there's so many decision makers, right? Like as the photographer, myself, I'm always looking to, the creatives that have hired me. And I always worry about, okay, how do I, they're looking to me for guidance and I'm looking to them for guidance. And so we have to sort of, stand up for what we believe in, call out things that, I like to make that part of my treatment when I can, so that people know when they're hiring me, that's really important. What do you ladies think? What about when you're first going into a job? Do you like to let people know that that's where you stand?
I think from my perspective as a photo editor producer, the buck kind of stops with me because I'm in charge, usually not saying super in charge because there's other stakeholders, but for the photo aspect, usually falls onto the photo editor or producer. And so making sure up front before we're even rolling in like pre-production, first, even like, who are we shooting? Who are we working with? And reaching out to them and finding out, what are your pronouns, or are there any, special considerations that we need to be aware of, and getting that information up front. So therefore we are making sure we are taking in consideration different needs, and making sure that everyone feels safe on set.
Mhm, mhm. And I think also some additional things too, in addition to pronouns, are, are there any ability, mobility issues we need to know about? Do we need a ramp? Do we need, let's make sure the space is safe and conducive. Do you have any light sensory issues? Is there anything we need to be aware of to create an environment? And I think it's, you don't necessarily need to go into the laundry list of all the things, but there's so many ways to make people feel safe. And so I think it's just thinking about that stuff.
And you bring up a good point. If you're not feeling comfortable, say we're on a big email chain, please pull whoever is in charge aside and let them know. It's like, if you don't want to let the whole world maybe of this one sensitive area, but at least let people know. Don't say silent. I've come across that course over my years of people saying silent, and you get there to set and we're trying to like troubleshoot, and trying to, band-aid it up. And where if you told us from the beginning, we would have, done our due diligence to make sure everything was taken care of. Because for me, our goal is, we want the photographer and the shoot, to be successful. We want to set you up for success. So the number one thing is make sure, don't feel fear that if you say something, oh, that could hinder me and I'll get fired from the job. 99% that won't happen. What will happen is that if you don't say something and then it causes issues that could have been prevented, that's when it causes issues and, broken trust, and, hey, why didn't you, communications. Like, again, everything is, every photo shoot is different. Every team is different. But I know most people going into these, we want to make sure that we, are prepared for mostly everything that could possibly happen, knowing that you never can, but don't be afraid to, speak up and let us know, because we want to make sure this is a successful shoot for not only you, but for everyone.
So maybe as a photographer, one of the first things we can do is, as soon as we, are awarded a job and we're in touch with the producer, that is the time to think about all the things and maybe have those conversations, and hopefully hopefully you and your producer are on the same page. But that's going to be your direct contact. And so you want to make sure that you're creating a chain of command, because, of course, as the photographer, you're going to be shooting, you're going to be, we're going to be engaged, and we're going to be noticing things. And we want to set up sort of a working relationship with the producer so that we're all paying attention to the right things. And even in pre-production meetings where we're talking to creatives and we're talking about the chain of command. And if you see something, say something. And, as the photographer, hopefully photographer and producer together make complimentary statements about being available and open to anything that may be tension creating, whether it's conversations around anything, just, again, pronouns, or even conversations about, we're not going to talk about religion. We're not going to talk about politics. We're not going to say things that could create in this really tender space where we need to get a lot done. We're not going to bring up those things, or, like, however you want to broach whatever things are on your heart. And maybe there is a laundry list, but you and the producer can create that from the get-go in those meetings. And then that can filter even into the call sheet. What do you think about putting something, in the beginning like that, like kind of setting up that space for everybody?
Right? Setting a tone essentially from the start.
Yep.
And I totally 100% like agree with that. You want to set the tone from the beginning, at least on the production side, because we'll get into it when we're like on set. But I always say is that, from the production side, we are always like, dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And the wild card is always the subject. Because you could say have those, you just never know, depending who you're, who's the subject or what it is, what the photo shoot is. You can have those best intentions. It's how do you handle it when you have someone who hasn't been really a part of the process of setting the tone, or the safe set, when that gets thrown in, and the wild cards like does things like out of your control.
Yep. Yeah. And when I think a lot of us, on shoots I've been on, I haven't really ever been in a space where somebody has really dedicated that time to setting up expectations and setting up a chain of command. So I'm actually kind of doing it for the first time for myself, because no one's modeled that behavior for me. So it's a little tricky, because you're like, well, I'm doing something that's new to most people. But maybe this is a good thing to start setting into motion for future generations to expect.
I love that, Jill, because I will say I empower photographers. I mean, again, there's a way to do it. I wouldn't do it aggressive, but be upfront and be like, hey, I'm doing this shoot. Love, I'm grateful for this opportunity, but hey, upfront, like, here's what I'm looking for in the set. Setting up, like, who do I go to if something goes wrong? What are the like asking questions? Don't be like, to photographers and creatives, like, always don't be afraid to ask questions to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And so you feel secure and safe, where it's like, okay, I've given like, hey, this is my expectations, and then the expectations of the crew I'm working with, and then same thing on the production side, who is hired me to do that as well. So everyone is on the same page.
So
I love that.
I have a question then, Karen. So what does one do if they are scared? if like, okay, I am, I'm nervous. I don't know whom do I talk to. Or you've talked to your producer, but you're still nervous. Like, how do you approach something when you're just nervous, just about the whole thing?
I always say it's like, you're always going to be proud until you've done like a lot of shoots. Like, if you're coming fresh, you feel like, oh, if I say, I'm going to be like complaining.
Right.
Again, everyone will use common sense of like what is like major and what is minor, and really kind of default. And now I'm not saying you can't report everything or you can't bring up anything, but again, if it's something that's going to affect I always say is, if it's something that's going to affect your success for the shoot, like this, like if it's like really going to affect you, and you can't produce your best work, you need to swallow that pride or fear, or just do it scared anyway, and just let them know. And again, 99% of the time we are like, thank you for letting us know, because we want to set you up for success. Getting into when we're on set and stuff like that, there's the mentality is always like, we just got to get it done. We got to get it done. It gets done. But there's going to be circumstances that you will have to kind of like, something will happen and be like, okay, I can't do my job. Then that's when you need to address it then, because you're being paid to do a job. So it's like, I always say, even if you're newer or you're scared, like if it's going to affect you doing your job, because what's worse, you being scared just to ask that one question, or you not asking that one question because you're scared, and then you do a horrible job, and then that reflects on you, even though you could have knocked it out of the park because you could have raised your hand. So that's the advice I would give. It's like, it's better. I rather you ask me the question or like raise it even before we even get on set, when there could be like issues that could arise of trying to accommodate then, if it's not an emergency.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important to try to align yourself with those expectations and the team, and you'll kind of find out who your allies are, and hopefully everybody on the creative team is all in agreement. Like, pronouns are important, making people feel seen is important, having a safe environment where everybody's allowed to collaborate. Hopefully everybody's on board with that, right? And you immediately who's going to be in your corner and who's going to help create that vibe. Exactly. And I think then when anything happens on set, you make eyes with your allies, and you say, hey, the thing that we were worried about is maybe on the horizon. I don't want to see it happen. Can we manage that so that we can keep on with this? Can we pull this person aside, or just let them know, hey, what you're saying just isn't cool. Like, that's not an we'll get into examples, because I've had a few examples like that too.
Yes.
That even just saying that now reminded me, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we had to pull somebody off set, and this is what we said.
Yes.
But that does bring up something that before we close this section of kind of the pre-production and alignment, I think the reason that it's so important to have even not just your creative allies, but having a diverse set, like in thinking about who you hire and thinking about how the whole point is for everyone to feel seen. And when you're picking your crew, when you're advocating for which talent you want to bring on set and how you want them to be reflected in the crew that's looking back at them, that's something that's become really important to me as I've gotten more and more opportunity to handpick the people I want on my team. And I think about things like, how can a talent feel safe if they look out and they don't see anybody that is in their shoes looking back at them? There's no ally in the room that they can immediately recognize. So I wanted to put that out to you all. And what do you think about that?
I 100% agree with that. But it's hard. On our side, people are set on their ways, and sometimes and it's like it's difficult to bring new people in, and they want people to, and it's same on your side of, like, if say you've been working for a photographer working with the same photo assistant or the same like lighting assistant or something, and they just know you, and it's like you don't have to, I always say it's like you can talk shorthand versus longhand, right? And start thinking, but again, how did you break into the business, and how someone else is supposed to break into the business and learn and be able to develop and grow. And I think in the space, you don't see that many people of color really, even in the photographer realm, there's more, but not in crews. Like I rarely see that. I always say it's like, first you need to assess to see how your team looks, what's missing, what perspectives that you can have that can even, that makes you see things in a different light. Then I would say then challenge yourself to look outside your inner circle, because again, the tendency for me, for everyone, like in the creative, it's like, hey, you go to a friend, like, who do you know? Or go to groups like, who do you know? And then it's like, if everyone looks the same, then it's like everyone, is like, everyone's going to come to and looking the same. So really challenge yourself to really look at other resources and, in other places that you might not expect. Because I was fortunate enough to be able to go to photography school, but a lot of people, and especially people of color, are not, because it's expensive. Like, I was fortunate to be able to do that, still paying off college debt, but I still got to go.
Here.
And then I would say the lastly is like, take action of like, I think a lot of people wait to be like, I have to have this big initiative, or I need to follow this big thing. It's like, no, like, hey, if you have like a photo assistant or someone who wants to break in and be in tech, and they, they've kind of worked their way up, or maybe they just done a few jobs here and there, and they just want to know, like, have a coffee chat with them, or bring them on as a PA. You don't have to have them like doing the major things yet, but at least they get exposure, and that goes on both sides. So it's like, again, it's like, it takes intention to make sure that you're reflecting what the world looks like on set. But again, it's hard because there's not a lot of people who get into this, because it's just hard to break in.
Right. Something that I just like to add, or think, when I approach topics or conversations like that, is usually I like to use the word unlearn. I don't know if anyone has heard of that. So, when you are having an open mind and you're like, yes, when you don't go into something thinking that you know everything, but I'm ready to unlearn. And, you're walking into a new space, you're walking into, maybe it's a new team, or however that is, you're ready to unlearn, just helps you to be open-minded, right? So it's something that I always just like to remind myself.
I love that. Unlearning.
All right. So did you have anything else to add in definition of a safe set, Karen, or anything else that we wanted to talk about the whole pre-production process?
I would just say bring all your questions there.
Yeah.
As many as you can.
Yeah.
And prepare.
Yeah.
So at least going in, you feel safe and you feel like, okay, we're gonna foster a great environment. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to lean, on your, production partner to make sure that you have what you need or your crew has what they need.
Right. So talking about being on set, what do you think, or what does everyone think? What does a safe set look like? Like what should your expectations be, and what should it actually physically look like as well?
I don't know if there's like a look, but I feel like you walk on and everyone knows where they need to be. Everyone knows their job and what they need to be doing. So it's not chaos.
Yeah.
So hopefully there's not chaos. There's no miscommunications. Everyone has been briefed beforehand and before the shoot of like, here's the protocol sheet. This is what we're doing. But obviously things, will change in the, minute to minute, but at least everyone has a base understanding of this is my job, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is maybe a restricted area I'm not supposed to be, this is, I already know like the on-set etiquette of not being on my phone all the time and just being professional.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think something that I've learned as of late is that sometimes we tell people things on a need to know basis because we think, oh, well, this person, like we're moving so fast, right? Because productions move really fast. And sometimes we overlook who needs to know what information. Like I've been, sometimes I haven't told PAs what their full job is. And I'm like, oh, they'll just figure it out on set. And I realize that that's not really a very equitable way to do things because then they're not doing their best job. And a lot of the time, folks that are working at the PA level would like to move up into different aspects. And so giving people all of the information is a more equitable way to do things. And that was something that I've recently learned that I wanted to share because I thought it really fell into clear communication, thinking about how everybody plays a part. No matter how small or how seemingly important it may be, everybody should have access to the information.
Right.
And to bounce kind of off of that is that from my side and perspective is I know anytime like we're getting close to like if it's the day before, even the morning of, if there's like some major change or request or something that's happening, I make sure I'm communicating if I'm working directly with the photographer or maybe I'm working directly with a third party producer to be like, hey, these are the changes. Look, I'm sorry, I just got them. Literally, I'm shocked as you, but I'm letting you know. And so how can we make this work and making sure that, everyone is on board and everyone feels okay, we're not throwing this at you, we're trying to make sure that we're able to get this new request, but at the same time make sure you're okay and make sure that you feel like you can accomplish that. And so because sometimes that's jarring and that causes kind of unstable, being in unstable, so it's not like safe anymore because it's like, well, now everything, but again, isn't that production for you, right? But making sure that like whoever's in charge, if there's like changes, making sure you communicate that, not like a need to know, but communicate that as fast as possible to everyone who needs to know it in the crew. So then they can prepare and then they feel now, okay, I'm safe. And then I'm prepared to do now these additional tasks or whatever is asked of me.
And I think just to add to that, I know we are using, being safe as a very broad word, but like I think we kind of just defined initially when safety, it could be everything, right? Like the language, the tone, the respect, and just all of that, right? So keeping all of that in mind during production or while on set as well. So it's not just physically feeling, okay, I feel anxious being here, but it's also, the language, the respect, the tonality, just all of that also make a difference, right? Have
Yes,
you
100.
have you been on sets that did not feel safe?
I haven't been on set, but an example I can give, I can't give like away the whole like details of it, but
Yeah.
it was, you know, it was during COVID. So I was like remote, and the photographer was photographing a celebrity subject. And I got word, because we were communicating, you know, via text and via Slack throughout the shoot, because he was sending me like, here's what we're getting, or here's what we're not getting. And he, you know, said like, when it was his turn to, you know, photograph, you know, the subject went up to him and was like, F you, I'm not going to do this, to his face, and then walked off. It's like, how do you, and I'm not there. And so how, I was like, oh my God, okay, what am I doing? And so my immediate thing is, I'm going to the executive producer who was on site and be like, hey, what is going on? To confirm, you know, make sure I'm getting all the side of the story. Cause I don't know, maybe he, you know, the photographer provoked him and he's, you know, I'm hearing one side, but it was confirmed like, no, it was the subject, and they were aware and there were witnesses. And, you know, working with my photographer and being like, okay, what do you need? Take a breather. Can you continue on? Like, it's making sure that he was feeling safe, that he felt like he could, you know, that he could continue if need be. And if not, then going to then my manager and being like, okay, we got a situation. Like, this person doesn't want to continue. Who do we, because we may have to bring someone else, you know, on to complete it, because who are we to tell him, force him, even though he has a contract, but you have someone who literally verbally assaulted him, you know, is this might as well kind of slapped him. Why should he continue? And how are we not getting sued? But with this, you know, for this story, you know, he was able to be like, I'm fine, you know, like, I just went out, took a cigarette break, and then I came back in, and he did his job, right? But like, you know, I never want to get to that. I think that's like, even though I wasn't there, I would not have felt comfortable. Just even look at the photos, I was like, I don't want to look at this guy.
Well, you know,
You know,
you bring
yeah,
up a really good point.
yeah,
You know, and mental health is another thing. I mean, you
yeah.
have to assume that when somebody is in an unregulated state, maybe because of a lack of safety or things that happen, you know, then
Yeah.
they're in a provoked state. And being aware of people's kind of ranges, and you know, people get
Mhm.
anxiety. People have there are reasons that people act out in ways that are not safe.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, that has to be, you know, something as well. Like we always want to be mindful of our crew and making sure
Mhm.
that everybody feels, you know, like, I mean, even something as simple as, I was talking to a photographer once that said she would always do like a check-in with people, like, hey, how are you feeling
Mhm.
today? Everything good? Like, you have anything going on that
Mhm.
you want me to be aware of? You know, if you're feeling low today because you've got things going on, you know, and this is like a little bit in
Mhm.
the weeds. You know, some photographers might be saying, well, I don't want to go through all that. I shouldn't need to ask you know, my 30 crew that I've hired if they're having an okay mental health day. But I do think that being in a welcoming, equitable environment means we need to remember that people are human, and
Mhm.
that sometimes people are going to have a bad day. And
Mhm.
if you're struggling with finding the right way to regulate yourself, if you're having, you know, working on your
Mhm.
meds, you're trying to get to a good place, or your blood sugar is low because you have anemia, and you know, things
Mhm.
happen, to be sensitive to that. So I just think that's
And
an
those are, I agree. Those are things that like say if you're like taking medication, or you have diabetes and like little thing, and you need to make
Mhm.
sure you're eating and stuff like that. Or
Yeah.
even if you're not feeling like mentally, I can't do it today, you gotta let us know.
Yeah, let us
And
know.
it's like, and you know, again, you may have to leave set, like, you know what I mean? But it's
Mhm.
better to leave set and not cause anything, or not saying it will be your fault, but just, you know, cause something that, you know, something that would disrupt the set, and
Right.
then cause then, oh, we're going into overtime, because, you know, again, in this business, you know, time is money. But you that's things like, see, again, we should know pre-production, not during, in, during production, when we're like trying to get what we need to get, because those are things where we can make sure, hey, we're going to schedule a 20-minute break so everyone can like sit down, eat, or hey, we're going to have, hey, here's these like if you have low sugar, like here's snacks. You
Right.
grab it when as needed, and you can hold on to it on set if we'll allow you to have that on set. This is why I always emphasize, like, it's better to let us know as much as possible up front than to wait until you get when we think we have a safe set. And then if you withheld something, then you're causing kind of not, the set not to be safe in the end for people, because they're expecting like, okay, everyone is aligned, everyone is on the same page. Okay, we're all doing our jobs, being professional, and then there's this hiccup where if it's something as simple as you could have told us this in pre-production and we could have had a solution already before we went into production, then that kind of causes tension, onto, the, production side of it, of
Well,
like,
and
well, why did this person?
I
I'm
think
just saying, and I want to really, like, if you're holding it intentionally, not like, oh, it just something happened that day or something like that.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point, because you were like, if you tell people, tell us ahead of time, right? Like if you have trouble with this or you have trouble with that. But I also think that this is a really good point. And I didn't think about safe sets in terms of like somebody's got low blood sugar and it kind of creeps up on them, or we're working all day in 100-degree weather and it's outside and people really need to not be overheated because they might pass out. And we're, as on the production team, like you and me, or, the photographer and the producers that are making the schedules, we're not making sure that people have ample breaks to cool down, or we're not making sure we have ample time where people can grab a granola bar and make sure their sugars, because HIPAA laws, nobody has to tell us they've got diabetes, but we should be considering that humans need breaks, right? Like humans need, so it's our job to advocate, even if a schedule is crazy, it's our job to advocate that, we have ample time for people to be humans.
That's a really
And
good
you should,
point.
oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just saying that's a really good point. Go ahead, Karen.
I was going to say, again, a good point, because this all comes back to pre-production, because say if you are working with a great production crew or like the photo team, they've already been looking at what's the weather like if you're not shooting outside and shooting thing. Where's the waters, where's the snacks, where, they're already prepping for that already. And when you get the call sheet, you should be seeing breaks. You should be, because again, by law, we do need to have breaks, and so we shouldn't be technically like going like a whole 8 hours with no breaks or anything, and stuff like that. And if you're seeing something like, okay, it's like going to be 110 and we're like shooting on asphalt, and you know what I mean? It's going to be, sculpture. You need to, ask those questions and bring those up. And especially if you're prone, like you're sensitive to heat, or you're sensitive to cold, or something, bring it up then in pre-production. And I think going back earlier, why, the question of like, what happens if someone is, fearful? And I think it's always because it comes down to like, if they bring something up, they're going to lose a job. Would you rather be working at a job that you're miserable and you're not doing your best because you are scared or afraid to walk away because you saw that it was going to be an unsafe set, but you were like, well, I really want to put this in my portfolio? So it's like, you kind of have to ask that question, because most crews will be like accommodating and common sense of like, oh, we know we're shooting. Because I've been in shoots where I've worked with amazing production partners, and they got this like, hey, do you need a fan? Here's a cool towel for you. Here, okay, you can sit in this van. Here, we turn on the air conditioner in the car for you. You could just sit in there and take a break. You know what I mean? Really take care of you, and so like, okay, I can make it like another 30 minutes because I know. And we're going to have another 30 minutes in air condition, and it's going to water, and here's snacks and stuff like that. But if you're working and you see the crew and you're already seeing that they're barely going to give you any time or break, or they're not even thinking in that way, is it worth you even trying to step on that set at the same time? So really advocate for yourself and know your values and know when to walk away.
I was going to say that's really the key. Know when to walk away, because sometimes it's not. Sometimes really the ask is not worth what it's going to cost.
I mean, unless Beyonce is like, I will travel to the Sahara for you. Like, I don't care. I will die, but I will have that thing, right? But most of the time, it's not that. Okay, you know, or whatever that thing is for that. Like that's the I will die for. I don't care, right? But that's rarely. That's 1 in a million. But it's like everything else, like the rest. It's like again, knowing where your values are and then knowing to walk away. And that's why it's like key before you even step onto the set or willing to agree to be in that set, you need to make sure you're asking the questions and making sure that you are bringing up anything that needs to be brought up to make sure it's taken care of so you can do your best work. So then the client is like, wow, yes, we loved working with you. And then you continue to get work from that client and other work from other places. Oh, yeah.
Karen, I think you bring up a really important point, and that is what are some of the trade-offs? And I think sometimes the trade-offs, and sometimes we're really hungry and we need the work. And sometimes we know that the client is asking what sometimes things that are unreasonable. And the things that you brought up are so important in terms of, I wish that maybe we could have a checklist of these are the pitfalls, these are the things to avoid. One, when there's too much being asked and there's not enough breaks and there's not enough where you might be putting your life and your crew's life in danger. All of these things are really important. And when we sit down to think about what the trade-offs are, we have to remember that when we take on a job and we bring our crew on, we're asking, not only are we putting ourselves sometimes in an unsafe situation, but we're putting our crew in that situation as well. And there's potentially damage that could be done. And that damage usually has to do with loss of trust. That's the word.
Yes.
Loss of trust.
I love what you brought that up because I always say it's like I love that you bring up. I always say if people are on the fence, it's like think about the crew. Like if it's just you, and I like always say it's a personal choice. I'm never gonna blanket like you should do this and this thing, you know. And again, unless it's like an extreme of like physical, mental like abuse or like something where it's like you need to go. Don't know. They're like wielding a knife. Like no, go away. Like run away, run. But it's like when it's like those kind of where it doesn't. It's like oh, but they're asking me to do this and another thing and another thing. It's like maybe like if you are having a hard time, it's like, are you willing to put your crew through that?
Yeah.
It's one thing if it's yourself and you're like, I'm just going to take this cross and for it, and that's just me. I'm suffering, and so I will take it. But I love that you brought up, it's like, think about your crew.
It's
because
so
then,
true.
because your crew will lose, you know, if you put them through hell, like, you know, you lose that trust and respect, and people do not want to work with you. So the same thing is like if you compromise on your own values and say I can do this, but then all of a sudden it's like you're not producing your best work. Okay, you've literally just compromised what you believed in, and you weren't even able to produce your best work. And so the clients are saying, why did we hire you in the first place? And then again, you broke that trust. So I always say it will come down to the individual photographer and their decision. But I love that you brought that up of like maybe to think if you're really having a hard time, it's like if you have a crew, would you want your crew to deal with that?
Right.
That is
because as a photographer, if you're hiring the crew yourself, it's one thing if like the production people are hiring like each individual part. But if you're bringing on, like, I want to work with this, this is my favorite assistant. I like this, like whatever, blah, blah, Digitech. It's one thing when you're doing it, so you feel responsible versus like if someone else is outsourcing it for you and you're just one piece of it in a sense.
Thank you so much, Karen. I have a question that's not necessarily a follow-up, and I know that I don't step on Jill and
step away, Martine.
Okay.
Step away. You're always so insightful.
So one of the things that someone in our committee brought up is harassment that was cases of harassment that happens on set. I was lucky or unlucky, I'm still not quite sure, of having to sit through quite a long anti-harassment training, both sexual harassment and just harassment in general. And while I haven't seen this happen on set, and maybe I'm lucky because, you know, the Midwest is best, and Midwesterners have that reputation of just being so kind. I know that it happens a lot where crew there's a group. One of the things that I learned about harassment is that even if there's a group of people who are sitting around and they're making jokes, inappropriate jokes, either about someone or about a group, a racial group or whatever group, and if there are others who are with them that are listening and potentially laughing, but not saying anything, it doesn't mean that those people who aren't saying anything are consenting to what is being said. And I'm not sure if you've had a chance to, if harassment has come up on, if you've seen this, and if you have seen it, can you talk to us a little bit about how to handle it, or maybe how you've handled it in the past, if it has happened to you?
I haven't seen it directly, but same thing of like looking at the like videos and stuff like that. I've heard, you know, there's been rowdy behavior on set. And this is a delicate subject, so I am not an expert. And again, each person's unique, but I think it's how you handle it depends on the severity. Like if it's something where you're on set, like say, and the guy, like the example I gave you, like said F you, or did something very vulgar and everyone is seeing it, you know, everyone has seen it, and it was done in a very public way, then that's a time where you need to kind of, and again, this is just how I would handle it, is that is the time where I'd be like, excuse me, I'm talking to the producer and the photo lead or, you know, director or whatever, and being like, this is not cool. And we're figuring out something there. Like we're figuring out like, what's the next steps, you know, course of that. Now, if it's something where it's like people are saying like off-color jokes, like comments, microaggressions, or something where it's not like so public, like where it's impossible to not stop, like, you know, it's because everyone is involved, because everyone has seen it and stuff like that. It's a little more nuanced in the sense of, to the person, it's like, if it's really affecting you, where it's like you can't do your job, or and again, I'm not saying that you should do this, but because it's just a business, if it's not if it's, and I'm not trying to give this as advice or anything, you know, this is just kind of like how I like have done things in the past. Is for me, it's like, if it's to the point where it's like it's not affecting my job per se, or like I know I can just get through it, then I wait until after the shoot, and then I have a talk, and being like, hey, you know, when you're doing that, not when you're doing a debrief, and then I'm bringing that up. And again, this is a very delicate topic, and I'm not an expert, and I wouldn't, you know, every situation unique, but that's how I would personally handle that. If the bigger the thing is, that's when you stop and be like, hey, we got to do something, you know. And most people are like, yes, totally agree. When it's like more nuance of like people doing jokes and people, it's hard to, unfortunately, you know, sometimes sets are like, what, I didn't hear it, and so let's go. You just take notes. And how I would do it, take notes, and then just bring it up and be like, and the debrief, and like, this happened and I felt uncomfortable. Because sometimes there's just things you may not be able to do, or, you know, but I always like be mindful. Again, you're not doing it, and you're approaching it in a cool, calm way. You're not being defensive, and you're just saying, hey, this is what happened, and I felt uncomfortable, and here's why, and here's what was said.
So I
And
have
so hopefully, oh, go ahead.
you go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
Oh, I was trying to say, and then I was going to say, you know, and then, you know, hopefully then they are able to relay that information to whoever needs that, and it gets taken care of.
Right. So just, since you brought that up, so I guess following up on that, if there are issues on set, right?
Mhm.
And like, for example, that incident that you mentioned or something else, and someone has to break a contract or something happens where you're like, okay, I have to walk out, and it gets to that point. What do you do? I mean, do you actually break a contract because you just don't feel safe, or do you talk to someone and try to figure out a solution?
I don't think it's ever gonna get, and again, it has to be so egregious. And I think in today's world versus like, back in the day, you're not gonna see that because I think people are gonna step in and things are gonna happen and then things are gonna be pivoted. People are gonna pivot. So I don't think it's gonna get to the point where you have to break a contract. I would say as a photographer, again, if it's like this big egregious thing where everyone has seen it, it's like this is just like this is a no-no. This is like in a sense like one of the first, like there's levels of like things you just don't do. You don't be saying that N-word like that. You don't be doing no Hitler salute. You don't be doing all these like those really egregious things where it's just like you cannot unsee that or say that or undo something like what I mean, grab someone like and then it's like everyone to see.
Can't go back.
Those are things, you can't take those back. And those are, I think, situations where I think productions would stop and things would be corrected then on the spot. Right. So I don't think I've ever seen, and again, as a photographer, again, this is why it's hard to give this step because it depends on the set, it depends on the crew, it depends on the, who the client. Because some clients are like, I don't care. So time is money. Let's go back to work. And some clients are like, okay, yeah, we want to rectify it. Like, I'm just trying to be real, like, because there's certain, most of the like all the places I worked at, they cared. So, they wouldn't be like, oh, time is money. Let's go. But I've heard other things where the client was like, y'all good? Okay, we got to go back on set and shoot this, like, kind of thing. So it's like, it's so circumstances to like the nuance of who you're working for, like what is it a safe set to begin with, because it might not be a safe set. It might be like we hired you the day before and like come on set, right? But I think as a photographer, again, because you're paid as much as, I would say, be professional in the sense of, and I know in the day and age, you shouldn't have to try to depart, and I don't like advocate it and stuff, but it's just like one of those things where if I'm like in that situation, and I've been in situations where I've just been comfortable and I'm like, my mindset, because of just being in production, I just get it done. I'm like, I partnerize it. I try to stay away from the thing that's causing me irritation if I can. If I have to work directly, I just make sure to keep it business and thing, and then I'm reporting afterwards and just getting it done, because at least they cannot say I did not finish my job at the end of the day and be like, oh, but you walked off and you didn't, because again, you shouldn't have to do this. At the end of the day, it's a business. Now again, I haven't had any horrible like set stories like where someone like but I do know it does happen every once in a while. But again, it always comes to the different photographer and how your toleration of it.
Yeah, I think.
But again, we should. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So we can go ahead and finish.
Oh, I was just saying we shouldn't have to even like. I'm so sad that we even have to talk about these like situations, because it shouldn't be happening. It should be common sense. But again, you have a lot of people who are still in the old guard.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't, but it's like for you, just making sure. That's why it's like it's very valuable. And again, there's so much you can do pre-production, because you can have the good vibes of pre-production. They can tell you everything that you want to hear pre-production, but you get to production and then you've been hoodwinked, bamboozled.
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
So
yeah, I was going to interject. It kind of depends for me about what is the intent. Because sometimes people are just a little bit ignorant about some of the things that they say, and those things are still harmful, which is why I think education is the biggest tool. And then sometimes people know what they're doing, and then there's and they just if you can handle the ejection, you eject them from set. If people are like for me, I know that sometimes people have said things and they truly did not quite realize the extent of the harm that they were doing. And I have tried to be very compassionate and like come from an education standpoint first and say, okay, this is why we are not going to do this on set. What you said is we're not going to be talking like that because these things are harmful, and the goal is to have a positive environment. And we don't need people questioning their validity or questioning the way that something looks on their body or whatever it is that they could be taking from your comment. So this is why those statements are harmful. But if it's a matter of, I think the intention was ugly, I think the intention was harassment, then my go-to is, if we can lose this person, then let's lose them. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, right? Like sometimes you can't. And if you can't, then it's like, it gets very black and white. We're not saying these things. And if you don't know how to mind that boundary, then we will eject you and so will take over. And this is how that's going to go. Because at the end of the day, like for me, I actually would rather be the person that says we weren't able to continue on with our stylist or our hair and makeup person or our digitech or whoever, and the production suffered a tiny bit in this way, and this is how we compensated, and this is why we did it, because what they were doing was making the talent unsafe, and the talent really is going to have to come first, like in a lot of ways. And so, it was worth the price, right? Like maybe we couldn't see the pictures fast enough because we had to shoot to card because the digitech had to, I don't know, like we lost our digitech or something, but we had to do it that way because of this, because at least we got authentic, work from our talent because they felt safe. And that was the trade-off. And maybe it really comes down to what's the trade-off, right? Like if you can do your job and just sort of negate that stuff, then like you said, Karen, you can let it be and just try to manage it in the afterward, in the debriefing. But if it really comes down to it, and there's a choice to be made, you make the best choice, and you kind of figure out how to negate the negatives, I guess.
Right.
I love that. Yeah. 100% agree.
Yeah. It's really hard.
But you have to but again, to bring up like with the fear, you have to, know who you are and know your values to be able to stand up and do that. Because a lot of people will be like, oh, we're on set already and we can't just lose the person and I need to get this job done. You have to be like, no, this will cost us more if we keep this person around versus keeping them. And hopefully the person, like, you take the time to say, because I think what gets lost is like, yes, we'll have a debriefing, but then people will forget about like giving that, critical feedback to that person to learn and grow. Because I don't want them to be completely iced out if they really genuinely just didn't know that what they were doing and stuff like that, but be able to learn from it. And then there's just people who are just going to be mean. And then when they're not getting calls and they're not getting work, then maybe they'll wake up and be like, no one wants to work with you.
I feel like at the end of the day, it's a lot of common sense, right? It's a lot of common sense.
It's common sense until you're in a pressure cooker, and then like, stakeholders are like, oh, we're spending all this money, and then can we do all this, and can we, like, we start kumbaya, and then one thing happens, and then that's when the chaos happens, and then things slip, and then there's things like even I will do, or like other people, so it starts kumbaya and it's like common sense. Yes, at the end of the day, it's common sense. But when you're thrown into, and all of a sudden it becomes a pressure cooker, and one thing goes wrong or something gets thrown in the wrench. And that's why it's like always good to be prepared and just be a professional and get it done. Right. Not get it done to the sake of like my crew is being hurt in some way, or it's unsafe, like literally, unsafe, like where it's like the morale or my physical mental mind is like I out of whack. But being able to what can I do to make it safe in this new circumstance?
Okay. Yeah, you bring up a really good point, like being as proactive as you can be, And I think also being aware when things change, knowing that like those little wrenches that people throw in halfway through the shoot, you know, it's like all of a sudden like, oh, can we add a few more shots? And you're like,
Yep.
wait, we don't have time for that. That means we have to have another dinner delivered. Oh, there's not enough time. Oh, people can just be hungry. Is that okay? Like, you know, it's like grinding it down to like, no, we need to think about what this is going to cost us, because are we getting a good product? Are we're throwing in all these wrenches. Is this going to help our output, or is it really just about quantity, not quality? And this is what it's going to cost us because we have to treat people right. You know, it's a lot to think about, but I think like, just like you said, you know, the more you do it, the more you can get used to thinking like this and advocating for the crew and for yourself and for common sense, right? Like it's not common sense to think we're going to add 1,200 shots on at the end. That's not common sense. Like, come on, guys, we're better than this, you know?
And to add on to your point of like common sense and being proactive, being able to see the bigger picture. As the leader, as like it's the photographer, you know, as a photographer, you're kind of the leader, and like you have a crew and stuff like that, and just being able to see the overall bigger picture as well, and not so in the moment, because sometimes you get into the moment and you're like, I can't, but then to kind of view it out and be like, okay, this is a pain point. Okay, how can we adjust? What are the changes we can make to get back to what we need to do?
So talking about the changes and you know those kind of points. So during debrief, or rather moving on to post-production, you know, what kind of things do you report? Do you talk about? Do you know, talk about how things could have been done differently? Do you talk about your experiences? Like, what are the things that you need to be discussing during debrief?
All of the above. Like if you have that opportunity, even if you don't have that opportunity, whoever you're in contact with, you always want to be like, hey, you know, even if it was a great shoot, it's like, hey, this was such a great shoot. I really love how this, maybe next time, you know, you give like, you know, some feedback, or like maybe communication could be better. Now, when it's gone kind of wrong, or there's been like some hiccups, this is the perfect time of like still being gracious. Like, I thank you for the job. You know, this was still a great shoot. Here's some issues that I had, my crew had. And again, coming at it from a critical feedback, so you might have to take a breather. So this conversation might not be having, you might be having a lighter, like a kind of like a brief conversation after set, but maybe like gathering your thoughts, really analyzing and like, okay, these are the main things I really want to get across, that are because sometimes you don't want to have a list of nitpicky of the soup was cold, blah, blah, blah. No, it's like the overall of communication broke down here, so maybe next time to think about, and always come with like suggestions. Don't just complain. Like, I'm a former complainer with no suggestions. I always say, you know, and someone came to me and like, okay, well, you complain about it, then what would you do? And I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So making sure to, you know, be in a space before you're relaying your feedback, your critical feedback. So you're not like coming off of like yelling or angry. It's like more like, I enjoyed this shoot, or maybe you didn't enjoy this shoot, but like, and here's why. And maybe going forward, like maybe to think about this and this and this, you know, and, you know, it's up to whoever receives it if they want to implement it, but at least, you know, you have, you know, raised your concerns and, you know, given some, you know, some ideas for them going forward. And at least if you decide to work, if it's a bad experience and you decide to work with that, you know, client again, at least from that feedback, you know exactly what to ask questions for and make sure what to request for. Like, so if it was bad communication here, you know, to be like, hey, can we make sure that we are like, we have good communication, or we're in sync in this and this area, or this broke down here. Let's make sure next time, or we're working again together, like, hey, let's make sure we do this first, because remember last time, and that's, you know, and that, you know, remedies like that issue.
I think I want to tag on to what you said, because I really loved that. Yeah. And I think, you know, as photographers, we get scared of anything that could come close to critiquing maybe the feedback wasn't great and you really wanted more communication because you weren't sure you nailed it, and you didn't know if the client was happy because there wasn't a lot of feedback and you couldn't really read body language and there was no one you could ask. And so it's like, we don't want to be critical. We don't want to say things that are critical. So maybe my thought, and I want your opinion, but what I've done is I try to make it about the language, like, hey, I didn't feel like we had the greatest communication on this next project, or if we, I'd love to see us have more communication. I'd love to see us make eye contact after every shot to make sure that we're happy. Do you think that would work for us? Because I was concerned that I didn't get the job done as well as I wanted to, or, like find ways to sort of to where you're not saying, well, you had bad communication. You don't want to, you don't want to criticize, but your language should be like, let's us do this. How about we try?
Yes, I agree. No, I'm not saying don't say, oh, the communication, but maybe say, hey, the communication broke down here.
Yeah.
So it's always, being aware of the language, but like when you're getting, again, this kind of circles back all to the pre-production, because here's questions to ask. It's like, how is it going to be communicated to me once we're ready to move on? The client's happy with what they got, and then the next shot. Because sometimes it's the art director is working directly, the photo art director is working directly with the photographer, because I've been both, like where I've been both the photo editor, art director, and producer in one, or I've been purely the photo art director and then had a producer and it runs through the producer. Like I have to, or on set, I'm allowed, like not saying I'm not allowed to ever talk to her, but there's a separation, a little bit of separation. And so finding out, like, again, ahead of time, like, oh, how is this going to work? Like, especially if you're working with a third party producer, because sometimes they're taking care of all the, logistics, the contracts and stuff. You're not even talking to the photo art director who's going to be on set to help art direct that. And so finding out about her beforehand on that point in particular, like, is the art director going to be coming to you and then you go? Because sometimes it's been like, I ask, hey, can we get this? And then the producer will go to the photographer. So it's not like a direct line sometimes. So just getting clear on that to know, okay, how will I know, like, I'm getting feedback? How do we know how? Because usually us, if we're having a bigger shoot, we'll have the digitech and so we can see it on the monitor and stuff like that. But again, if you don't have that information, or say like you're not getting that feedback, again, you could say, hey, I would have loved to have more feedback. So yes, it's all in that language of how you're presenting it. Like I said, you don't want to come out negative. You don't want to be like, sound like you're whining or complaining. And that's why sometimes if it's like been like a bad shoot or it's not less desirable, sometimes it might be like when they come to you at the end of the set, you might be like, it went great, but I need some time to gather my thoughts. And then you can be more, more graceful or something, and not spew and be like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's sometimes you like, it's better to be like, can I get you back to you, even if it's like a couple hours after the shoot? Like, I need to get home. I need to get back to the hotel room. I need to eat. I need to take a shower. And really, that's why I always advocate, is like, take a breath.
Take your time.
Especially if it hasn't gone well. And especially if something traumatic has happened, or you know what I mean? If it just hasn't gone well, it's because it's one thing when it's like everything went well. It's like, yay, team 5. You're not going to have, I would advocate like, hey, if you have feedback, even because I will ask, but be ready to receive it yourself.
Don't act.
So that's why I said, don't act on input. Be able to receive it yourself if you're going to give it back to thing. But I always advocate that loop, because like, how do I get better as a producer or art director? Just like, how do you get better as a photographer? You don't get that feedback, but sometimes you don't.
Yeah,
but it's at least you. So but I always say it's like, it's better for you to be like, at least I gave the feedback, like good critical feedback. And then they do what they will with it.
Yeah, I think it's always a great idea. And I'm guilty of not doing this a lot of the time, but reaching back out to the agency producer and saying, hey, did you have any feedback? I'd love to know if there's anything you noticed that I could have been stronger at. And, be open to feedback, because it is the only way you'll get better, because you might learn you thought everything went great, but maybe somebody wasn't pleased with the way you XYZ. And if you really try to make that connection and really express your desire to be better, maybe they'll actually tell you. You know, sometimes they won't, and they just don't hire you again. But I think it's always worth the ask.
100%. I know it's hard. It's hard because I haven't gotten good feedback, but it was great that I did, because then I'm not like in la la land thinking, oh, I'm doing everything right. And then, oh no, I didn't. Someone called me out. So it's like, okay, thank you. Noted. And that's helping me get better. Yeah, it's not the best thing, but even when it's good, like you think you've done good, or that hasn't gone so well, don't be afraid to ask that. Because again, what are the thing you could get is like, no, we don't, you did fine. Okay, bye. At least you asked. You can't,
You tried.
At least you tried, you know what I mean? But it's always good to get that kind of being like, maybe it's not like you're like photo, maybe the feedback is not about like your photography. Maybe it's like, well, we noticed you were kind of whiny, or you weren't communicative, or you were kind of slow when we were asking for, because we were on the schedule, and you were, those are valuable things also as well to know, like, hey, when I'm on set, I need to be more efficient, and I need to make sure that I'm getting things done on time.
Right.
Yeah.
I find that when during the pre-pro meeting, it's a great time to ask. The question that I ask normally is, what are some of the similar characteristics of photographers that you've loved to work with over and over again? And sometimes they will tell you what they appreciate. And so then you can bring some of those things out of your toolbox, or if it's something that you don't do very well, then you could be sure that you keep an eye out on that, whatever that flaw is that you may have. And then you, like you said, Karen, ask for feedback towards the end as well.
I think to bring this full circle is that, to create a safe set, it all starts in the beginning.
Yeah.
First, know who you are as, yourself as a photographer, your values. So going into the shoot, you're knowing to ask the right questions, ask all the questions, and then reveal whoever you need to reveal to, any accommodations that you need. And again, there's so much you can do up front, because again, when you're on production, that is the wild, wild west, because anything can happen. But knowing then, your values and your limits, when you get on set, being able to see the bigger picture, being professional, knowing when you need to take, like, this is a timeout moment, and this is a moment where, okay, noted, we'll give that feedback at the end, and I will continue and make sure my crew is okay and taking care of the crew. And then afterwards, giving that kind of that feedback loop of the things that you noted, and being like, making sure to say any positive and constructive, way of like feedback to, like, hey, when this happened, this made me uncomfortable, and this is why. Always following up why, because that just strengthens your argument more, versus like, well, this made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Versus, so it's just like making sure you're taking care of yourself, being proactive, and stepping in when you need to step in.
Man, I feel like you've summed up everything. Like that was like the perfect.
I tried to
full circle. That was amazing.
Well, it all comes back to pre-pro, because it's like, it's you, and again, another thing you can do is, like, before you're working with, a client, do your research. Reach out to other photographers who have worked with that client, or like just research them and see what pops up. If something, if you see all these bad, comments, or photographers like, let's have a drink. To let you know, like, to let you one of those kind of things, right? So at least you know what you're stepping into. Because I always say to the photographers, I'm not going to tell you say no to, unless it's like literally, physically, mentally putting you in danger. It's going to be up to to the photographer if they take the job or not. But at least go, eyes wide in.
Right.
That's one of the reasons that I will always give APA a plug, because being part of this network of photographers and having access to the information that your colleagues have has been invaluable to me. and it has been such a beautiful thing to be able to share my experiences with other photographers and vice versa, and be able to call and say, hey, have you worked with this person? Like, is there anything you'd recommend? And, you know, it's so wonderful to have access to that information. So if you don't be shy. And if somebody doesn't want to give you information, at least you've tried to be community and be willing to give that information yourself.
Exactly.
But yeah, having a community is amazing. I mean, I feel like we've covered off on all the topics. Ladies, does anybody else have anything else to say?
Thank you so much for having me. I love these type of frank conversations that are not had all the time, and people are afraid to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
But my like, I guess leave office is like, don't be afraid to ask questions and know who you are as a photographer and your values.
Karen,
that
how
will be
can
your northers.
you?
How can
totally
what? Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I totally interrupted y'all.
No worries.
I'm an interrupter. Would you tell everybody where they can find you, because they need to follow you?
You can find me on Insta at Black Visual Queen. My website is blackvisualqueen.com. LinkedIn, it's Karen Ann Williams. That's way when I had it a long time ago. So it's not all Black Visual Queen. It would be cool and stuff like that, but that's where you can find me at.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. And we will catch you on part 2, where we will continue the conversation with new folks. And we will be talking about the working relationship with talent, how to create safety around talent. And we will be hearing from some more of our diversity community members. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.